Okay, this is where we're going to pick up where we left off from cell organelles, the first video. This is cell organelles, the second video. We're going to pick up exactly where we left off and finish these out. The next organelle that is essential, that we all understand and know about because it is going to come up later, is the mitochondria. The mitochondria looks like a kidney bean. It usually has a squiggly little line on the inside. And we'll talk about what those are, but it is very important. It's often called the powerhouse of the cell because it does synthesize ATP. You've already learned that ATP is your cell's energy currency. It's the molecule that provides energy for the cell at the molecular level. And so the mitochondria, by the process of cellular respiration, does make that ATP, or essentially put the energy into that format. And so it's very important for cells that need ATP to do whatever it is that they're doing, that they have plenty of mitochondria working all the time. So these little squiggly lines on the inside are inner membranes. It does have a double bound membrane system. Those inner membranes are called the cristae. The space between the cristae are called the matrix. The process of cellular respiration occurs in both of those areas. So the first step happens in the matrix, and then the second part happens in the cristae. Excuse me. But the mitochondria is very important. It is one of our organelles that is going to come up a lot in A&P1 and as well in A&P2. At the bottom it says energy is extracted from organic molecules and transferred to ATP. What that is trying to tell you is that the energy that's in a glucose molecule is released into ATP by the process of cellular respiration. And there it is, up close and beautiful. Okay, this starts to talk about the evolution of the mitochondria, the idea that the mitochondria has evolved from bacteria, and that it does have its own mitochondrial DNA. For our purposes, this is intriguing to me. It's amazing to me, but it's not really necessary. We're not going to be talking about mitochondrial DNA. We're just going to be focused on the DNA that's in the nucleus. So while this is intriguing, it's probably not going to come up again. Okay, well, the next organelle that we're going to look at are the centrioles. They usually look like little cans of soup or little bundles of sticks when we look at the cell picture. They are going to be important when we talk about cell division, which is probably very soon, next week. And they are going to help organize and move the chromosomes during that cell division. So they are usually perpendicular to each other, and we see them mostly during cell division. So it depends on what kind of picture of the cell you're looking at if you're going to see them or not. If it's right in the beginning of mitosis, which is cell division, you will see them, but if it's just a cell hanging out, you might not see them at all. And they are made of microtubules, which if you go back to the first video, those were the part of the cytoskeleton that helps give the cells some structure. And that's what they look like, but usually that's a very detailed picture. I would say they don't usually look that detailed, but that's what I mean by a bundle of sticks. Okay, centrioles, usually when we talk about them, we're talking about cell division, and that's because that's the time that the centrioles are being utilized. But centrioles are made of microtubules, and when we look at cilia and flagella, which I feel like we did that on a previous video, but the reason why it's mentioned here is because they are essentially a single centriole. So they're both made up of those microtubules, and that is how those two appendages out of the cell are formed. Okay, we already talked about the cytoskeleton in the other video. It does determine the shape of the cell. It helps support the cell, organize everything inside, kind of directs the movement of things coming into the cell, going out of the cell. And if the cell is a movement type of cell, that doesn't necessarily mean the cell is moving, but let's say we're talking about inside the trachea or the esophagus moving something on by, the cytoskeleton is going to take a role in that. Then this talks about the type of filaments and tubules. I kind of like to lump them all together. They're all made of protein. So all of the cytoskeleton is made of proteins. When we get through different organ systems, we will see examples of this. So here it talks about, under microfilaments, it talks about actin produces cell movements. Well, when we get to muscle cells, we'll definitely talk about actin in more detail. And same thing here. When we get to certain types of cells, certain junctions, we may talk about those fibers a little bit more. For now, you can just know that cytoskeleton is made of proteins, and it helps give the cell its structure. Great, we talked a little bit about inclusions during the first video. They are not organelles. They do not have a membrane organelle at all. They are not essential for cell survival. A lot of times they're just little storage, or they're foreign bodies. So maybe a bacteria, maybe a virus. And so again, on your pictures of the cell, we are probably not going to see these at all. The reason that this is included here is to understand that it's not just the organelles that are in the cell. There's other stuff going on in there too. And again, depending on what kind of cell it is, you may see different cellular products being stored in an inclusion. This is the table that goes over all of the organelles in your book. I would encourage you, and we will do this in the lab, but to be very dutiful in learning the structure or the appearance of the organelle, and then also to learn its function. That is going to be not only handy for this test, but is also going to come in handy when we go through different types of cells and different organ systems in the future.